Connor, do they actually care about things like the climate? I mean, if you believe climate change is real, do they actually care? Not that it matters, or it's just all just about power?
Oh, I think I wouldn't be surprised if, on the ground level, at least the activists and the people that they conscript into their cause do care somewhat about climate issues. I think quite a few of them use it as a sort of Trojan horse, Green New Deal style, to implement a form of socialism. I mean, you've got Ida Auken, for example. She's actually the Danish environment minister. If she's been putting her entire life into climate policy for her country, you'd think that she would actually care about it. But then she writes for Forbes that article, "Welcome to 2030. I have no privacy, own nothing, and have never been happier." I don't understand why the confiscation of our privacy is so conducive to apparently lowering carbon emissions, is seeming as that's the goal. I don't see why communism, given the Soviet Union's terrible track record on environmentalism, seems to be the way forward for this new technocratic elite.
Well, their history on communism isn't so great either. Okay, let's talk about that article itself. What exactly does that mean, Connor? I have no privacy, I own nothing, and yet I'm happy? That sounds not good.
No, it's about the idea that in a 2030 utopia, all of our property has been expropriated. Basically, we've been priced out of private transport, so we're just sort of forced to take buses from now on. We use entirely digital, contactless means of paying for things. Now, the problem with that is if you create a global digital infrastructure with a global digital identification system, which they've actually proposed, by the way, there's a blueprint for digital ID document from the World Economic Forum, and they corresponded with the British government, the Australian government, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, surprise, surprise, and pretty much every national bank and international financial district to create a global ID synced with a corporate identity. So their idea is you will tap in and out of everything you ever own or want to rent, and you will be using your social media ID, your health ID, etc. to use it. And say you say the wrong thing on social media, you're critical of the climate, for example, as we were slightly earlier in this interview, well, boom, there goes your ability to buy goods and services. You'll be using grocery speakeasies like people without a vaccine passport were in Latvia early last year.
Good grief. Okay, you brought up something earlier that I don't think a lot of people understand what they are. Social credit scores. What is that?
So, modelled very much off the Chinese government's way of doing things, a social credit score looks at your ability to be a good citizen, how compliant you are with government edicts, whether or not you talk the party politically correct line. A reminder, the term political correctness, as well as concentration camps, came from Vladimir Lenin. So they're obviously taking their lead from communism yet again. And if it were just correct rather than politically correct, the word political wouldn't need to be a prefix. But neither here nor there. The idea of a social credit score basically says, hey, if you're a good citizen, if you say the things we want you to say, if you participate in good activities, for example, the UK government are currently developing a climate nudge app to behaviourally nudge you, based on the insight they learned from behavioural science during COVID, towards taking more environmentally sustainable behaviours. They're also exploring one for health. Food vouchers, for example. It's ensuring that you get incentives for being a good little citizen. So woe betide the people who actually dissent against the government's line.
Okay, the UK is that's so odd to me how this kind of stuff is happening in countries like the UK. I mean, you say this happens in China, I get it, but the UK?
Well, the UK has taken a lot of Chinese investment over the years. I believe the Chinese are actually our leading investor in our energy grid over here. Very much like how the Americans actually threw their hands up and said, hey, why did Biden lift the ban on Chinese transformers coming to our energy grid? That doesn't seem safe. Imagine all of your nuclear infrastructure being owned by China. That's us. Hello. No wonder you had a war for independence. The UK also is the leading spearhead on the G7's development of digital central bank currencies. That's why President Biden signed that executive order the other day exploring the use of a state cryptocurrency. That was our Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, also the man involved in developing the World Economic Forum's blueprint for a digital identity. Basically, the UK is determined on creating this. So he formally evacuated passport before we ditched them. The only reason we did that, by the way, is because we caught everyone partying under lockdown, and for a global digital currency. It's pretty weird. We've wandered off the reservation for supposedly a conservative government in this country.
This sounds like COVID ushered a lot of this stuff in. What role did COVID play in moving the WEF's plans forward?
Well, I think the World Health Organization is also tied up with a lot of the funding bodies and the special interests and the countries that the WEF is involved in. Of course, Klaus Schwab has a strange affinity for Xi Jinping. He strongly echoed his remarks at last year's Davos agenda, and President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party ensured that Dr. Tedros got appointed the head of the World Health Organization. Also, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation heavily funding the World Health Organization, at the same time being involved in the consultancy period for the digital identification system the World Economic Forum are pushing. It's sort of interlaced here, but it's interesting because New York's digital COVID passport is actually being repurposed post-pandemic, even after they're meant to be dropping it. I suppose that's going to be something to do with the financial system within the state. Obviously, that can't be rolled out federally, but I wouldn't put it past the Biden administration. Over here, we decommissioned our vaccine passports, but we have devolved parliaments, so Scotland and Wales have slightly different governments, and they're also looking at repurposing how the vaccine passport is going to be used for the future.
Good grief. All right, finally, you've brought up Bill Gates, well, Bill and Melinda Gates and their foundation a couple times. I view this guy as being as bad as anyone out there and behind a lot of this stuff. Am I wrong?
Well, it's pretty strange because when you first start investigating things and you hear, oh, Bill Gates is doing this, that, and the other, you sort of brush it off as a conspiracy theory. But the more you actually look, very much like the World Economic Forum, at the websites of these people, the more you look at, for example, that he owns pretty much the Guardian newspaper, that he donates plenty of money to the Trusted News Initiative, which was the body of journalism preventing vaccine hesitancy around the world and censoring things like COVID misinformation, including myself, by the way. When I mentioned this on national TV in the UK the other day and put the clip up on LinkedIn, my post got suspended for COVID misinformation, even though it cited all the sources. This guy has a lot of money, he's entirely unaccountable, no epidemiological or climate experience, and yet he's controlling a hell of a lot of our lives. Why on earth are we deferring our freedom to unelected international bodies and billionaires? It makes no sense to me.
Don't miss Jesse Kelly Breaks History, The Forgotten Genocide, the first episode of a new series available now exclusively for First TV supporters. Visit the First TV app or thefirsttv.com to subscribe and start watching today.